Uh, Thank you all for joining us this evening for an update about the NuHart State Superfund. It's a community meeting co-hosted by us, North Brooklyn neighbors, and Councilmember Stephen Levin. Benjamin, would you like to say something?
Sure. Thanks, Anthony. Yeah, this is thanks for helping us host this. We have I'm sure most of us, or many of us, have been to many NuHart meetings. In the time that I've been with the council member, this is the third owner, and we have started and stopped, and we are on our way again. We are, of course, always our main concern is the community safety and health. We have had a couple of conversations with the new potential owners, I think, or maybe owners by now, and DEC, and just want to get everybody off on the right footing. I know we were a little behind on the asbestos removal, but that now that we are here, we will continue to answer your questions and work with you to make sure everybody's safe, and that as we move forward, and there's as much transparency as possible. So we feel good about where we are and where it's going to go right now. And I will pass it off back to Anthony.
So really quickly, I want to just go over the agenda. So we'll have a welcome and opening remarks. We'll have followed by a refresher of the NuHart record of decision given by the TAG advisors. As many of you know, North Brooklyn Neighbors is a grantee of the Technical Assistance Program, and we hired 2 outside consultants to be reviewers for the community. So they'll be presenting where we ended up in 2019 at the record of decision. Then we'll have an update from state and city agencies about what's happened since the record of decision. Finally, we'll have a status about the site and the future of the site offered by a developer that's seeking to purchase, well, is in the process of taking ownership of the site. Then finally, we'll have a long session for Q&A. We encourage attendees to use the chat, as well as the Q&A function. Nicole DeFeo and Alan Miner, board members from North Brooklyn Neighbors, will be managing the Q&A to ensure that questions rise to the top, and we get and monitoring the chat. So first, I want to hand it off to is Assembly Member Gallagher here.
Yes, I am.
Yeah,
can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. You want to start off with some remarks about the
site?
Sure.
Yeah. So NuHart, this site is a really dangerous one, and it's a tricky one too, because everything is able to move around. And I'm really proud of all the work that North Brooklyn Neighbors has done over the last decade to really monitor this and make sure that we're holding the developers accountable. And I think it's really going to be another situation where we all have to be vigilant about what is happening at the site. And I know that my office intends to be working really closely with you all to make sure that the cleanup is going correctly, and that the cleanup is done at a level that is safe to human health before anything is developed there. So I'm really looking forward to the collaboration and to the presentation. And thank you everybody for coming out.
Thank you. I'm going to share the agenda one more time just so everyone caught it. I'll review it again. So next up, we'll have a refresher about the record of decision given by our TAG advisors, followed by an update from state and city agencies, a number of which are on the call. And then finally, the status and the future of the site given by folks who are taking ownership, and finally Q&A. So next up, we have Joe and Alan. If you guys feel free to share your screen, introduce yourselves again to the community.
Okay, I've shared my screen. Anthony, this is Joe Gardella,
Yep.
and Alan Rabideau will chime in here and there. We have a very tight focus on just a few slides to talk about the record of decision. The ROD is the acronym that's used, and I'm happy to answer questions during the presentation, but we're going to have a good Q&A following the presentation, and be happy to get more in depth. So a little bit about us. That's me. I was born and raised in Detroit and did my graduate work at Pittsburgh, followed by postdoctoral work at Utah. I've worked in community environmental science since 1975, when I was a long-haired hippie undergraduate. I've been a professor at UB, at the University of Buffalo, since 1982, working in these areas of research, and really began community environmental work as part of my teaching and research in 1994. I've done additional work in Ghana and in China, and been recognized for that work. And I have worked on 2 TAG grants from DEC in Buffalo, New York. Alan, would you like to narrate yourself?
Sure, Joe. I have been academics for about 30 years, teaching here at the University of Buffalo. Before that, I worked in consulting for about 5 years. I don't have quite the same focus that Joe has had on community projects, but I've done TAG in similar things all through the time that I've been in academia. A lot of pro bono stuff with local groups and companies as well. I think there's another bullet there, Joe. There you go. So that's the work that I do. The book cover that's up is a recent book by the National Research Council that kind of gave an overview of the future of cleaning up complex contaminated sites. So I try to stay somewhere close to the leading edge of our field and deal with some of the issues. NuHart is a pretty complicated site, so I look forward to contributing as a technical resource. And that's plenty for me.
Okay, there's a lot of material in this slide, which is entitled, "What is the purpose of a record of decision?" First of all, I've made the PowerPoint available to Anthony, so you can either contact him or get my contact information. I'm happy to send the whole thing. But the DEC website that describes the record of this, what a record of decision is at the top. It's a technical document that's the final result from an extensive investigations and choice of remedy that identifies a solution to remove significant threats from public health and the environment. RODs are an important part of the process, from Superfund efforts by New York State and by federal actions governed by EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers, among others. Each ROD produced for an inactive hazardous waste disposal site contains information about the site, identifies the problems, and describes the remedial solution. In addition, the decision-making process that yielded the remedial action plan is documented to demonstrate that the appropriate solution was selected. RODs are binding legal documents that must be followed by the potentially responsible party, commonly known as the PRP, unless deviations are justified and approved by DEC and a judge. Here's what the ROD contains: location, the problem identification, the status of enforcement actions, goals for remedial action, discussion of remedial alternatives, and presents the potential remedial action, including a no action alternative. And people often ask about why are we studying new action, and that's so that you can show what the difference is by doing something. It's built into the process in the Federal Superfund Act and in New York State's activities in Superfund. The selected remedial action describes the planned remedy, and there's a responsiveness summary, documents public comments about the selected remedy. And there's an administrative record. It references reports and other documents. So these are meaty documents with a lot of information. But for the public, there's a chance to make public comments about as the ROD is developed, and those public comments are provided with an answer from, in this case, DEC. You have the ROD for NuHart, and what's next? There'll be another planning step where the community has input. The actual activities required for remediation and cleanup will be discussed. Planning for long-term protections and monitoring for future controls will be part of the discussion going forward. And the elements in this case from this particular ROD include the remedial design, excavation, backfill, and cover. I'll let Alan answer questions about the phthalate compounds that are underneath and are being, at least we're still being recovered when we visited in 2019, and I'm assuming that's still operating inside presently. Soil vapor extraction, vapor mitigation, and institutional controls and monitoring, site management, and eventual shutdown of the remedial systems are all in the elements of remedy. So for the community, institutional controls, it's jargon for what will be a concern of everybody, making sure that anything that's underground, for example, is controlled and monitored, and expect the community members will want reports during the process of remediation. And so I'll just end there, and we are willing to respond, like everybody else, to the questions and answers in terms of our roles and responsibilities in the TAG grant. And I'll stop sharing.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Joe. So we'll have more to come from Joe and Alan. Next on the agenda, we're going to hear from DC and the other state agencies. So Jane O'Connell, if you're ready, and if you guys have something to share, feel free.
Yeah, just give me a second, Anthony. I will share my screen and I'll go through my presentation. This is Jane O'Connell from DEC. All right, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, just give me a second while I share my screen. Okay. Yep, I have to start at the beginning. Give me 1 second. Okay, let me go back up to the top of my presentation. Good evening, everyone. This is Jane O'Connell. I'm the Regional Remediation Engineer for New York State Department of Environmental Conservation in Region 2, which covers the New York City area. Some of you have met me before. Prior to COVID, we were doing these, Anthony and North Brooklyn neighbors and Councilmember Levin were hosting these meetings on a somewhat more regular basis than we've been doing, obviously. And so it's good to be back talking to you guys. And, I'm happy to see that we may have some positive things to talk about tonight. Just having a little trouble with my mouse. Let me just see if I have the arrow key. Okay. So just as an overview, you just got an update from your TAG advisors, a good overview of sort of the record of decision process. And the record of decision was issued back in March of 2019. Subsequent to that, the current owner, DuPont Street Developers LLC, filed for bankruptcy protection, and that sort of put the skids on everything. And then compounded with COVID, things have sort of, there hasn't been much activity at the site in a couple of years. But there's a light at the end of that tunnel. The DuPont Street 1 LLC, which is the secured creditor of the current owner, has submitted a bid to purchase the site through the bankruptcy process. This entity, DuPont Street 1 LLC, in good faith and hopeful that the pending approval of the sale by the court, they have been funding the current work at the site, which includes, operation and maintenance of the IRM system and some other things, some other ancillary things I'll get into on a subsequent slide. But the new buyer, the prospective buyer, is planning to remediate and develop the entire property into an as-of-right mixed-use commercial, retail, residential building. And I think they will give you a little bit more details on that towards the end of the presentations. As you know, the western portion of the site is being remediated under the New York State Superfund program. The SSF is the acronym, State Superfund. The eastern portion of the site will be remediated under the New York State Brownfield Cleanup Program, the BCP. I'm not able to, hang on one second, there we go, sorry. Okay, so just an overview of the site for folks who may not know it. The portion of the site that's highlighted in green here, that is the State Superfund, the registry site. That is the portion of the site that had the historical manufacturing operations on it. This is where the underground phthalate tanks and some other, active manufacturing processes took place where they were managing and storing hazardous waste. The eastern portion of the site in blue is, we have an application from the prospective purchaser to remediate that under the Brownfield Cleanup Program. Historically, there were no manufacturing operations on this portion of the site. It was generally office space and storage of manufactured material. So rolls of plastic, things like that. Again, the manufacturing happened over here, storage of completed manufactured materials over on this side. Okay, so the record of decision, as I mentioned, was issued in March of 2019, included the following remedy elements. There was an on-site phthalate and chlorinated solvent source removal, which consists of installation of shoring around the perimeter of the Superfund site, excavation of the majority of the site to approximately 16 feet below grade, removal of all the USTs and piping, and that excavation would be done under a ventilated structure to control odors and prevent contaminants in air from getting off the site. So that's this figure sort of shows the location of where the barrier would be, and this entire area is anticipated to be excavated. We also had air sparge soil vapor extraction, which will treat the chlorinated solvents. I saw there was a chat question from, I think from Laura Hoffman, asking about the acronyms. LNAPL is an acronym for light non-aqueous phase liquid. That's generally the phthalate material that we're talking about. TCE stands for trichloroethene. That is a chlorinated solvent that was used in cleaning of the manufacturing equipment. So we have this air sparge soil vapor extraction that will treat the chlorinated solvents in the soil and the groundwater in the northeast portion of the site and down gradient of the site. There is a requirement for off-site barriers to prevent phthalate migration. There's off-site phthalate recovery using recovery wells or trenches. Again, those details will be worked out in the remedial design, which I'll get to in a few minutes. And then vapor mitigation to address soil vapor intrusion on-site and off-site. This is a figure that sort of shows the off-site, this is the off-site barrier wall. And in this area here, where there is phthalate that is underneath the street, there would be recovery trenches or wells to recover any remaining phthalates that are off-site. The chlorinated solvents are up in the northeast portion of the Superfund site. And so this is the area that is targeted for treatment using air sparge soil vapor extraction or an equivalent technology. Again, that would be worked out during the remedial design phase. And then this is a figure showing the area that is proposed for vapor mitigation. This was discussed during the ROD public meeting. So with the current status of the Superfund portion of the site, again, there is an interim remedial measure, IRM, consisting of two phthalate recovery wells that are continuing to operate on the Superfund portion of the site. That is continuing, and we get monthly reports on that, on how much product is being recovered, et cetera. They are also continuing to monitor all of the off-site wells to confirm that the phthalates are no longer migrating any further off-site. In addition, as I mentioned, the Superfund portion of the site was an active generator of hazardous waste. That means they fall under a federal program called the Resource Conservation Recovery Act. And the RCRA program essentially requires that any hazardous waste generation or storage areas have to be properly closed before the building can be demolished. They're going to have to do investigation of the building itself, inside the building. So right now we have this RCRA closure plan that was submitted by the prospective purchaser in September. It is currently under DEC review. That plan will be issued for a required 30-day public comment period. And those closure activities must be completed before the building demolition can proceed. Now, this is above and beyond, these closure activities are above and beyond the standard lead and asbestos abatement. These are closure activities related to the storage of the phthalates and other materials that were used during the manufacturing process. In addition, the prospective purchaser will be entering into the existing consent order as a remedial party. They will be bound by that consent order upon taking purchase of this, taking ownership of the site. And finally, the remediation on the Superfund site will not proceed until the remedial design is completed and vetted by DEC, DOH, and your TAG consultants. So moving on to NuHart East, that's the portion of the site that the prospective purchaser is looking to bring through the brownfield cleanup program. They have submitted an application which included a supplemental investigation work plan and an interim remedial measures work plan. That application, those work plans were submitted in August 2021. The purpose of the supplemental investigation work plan is to collect additional data to develop the remedial action work plan that's required for the eastern portion of the site. The IRM work plan proposes to remove 5 petroleum underground storage tanks, USTs, and the associated petroleum impacted soil. That's in the northeast corner of the BCP site. In addition, these IRM excavations will allow installation of a minimal foundation element, which is required to allow the site to qualify for affordable housing credits. This is a figure that shows sort of a schematic diagram, again, registry site on the left, brownfield site on the right. Up in this area here, there are some tanks that stored petroleum that was used for on-site heating of the office building portion of the NuHart site. Right now, there's a plan to excavate those out. Again, that will not proceed until the IRM work plan is approved. So the BCP application was deemed complete on December 4th. It is currently in a public comment period. So the public comment period applies to the application, the supplemental investigation work plan, and the interim remedial measures work plan. That comment period ends on November 12th. All right, so current and upcoming activities. Some of you may have been aware there was some geotechnical investigation that was done over the summer. That was performed by the prospective purchaser to collect geotechnical data to develop their foundation design. There is an asbestos abatement which was started by the previous owner, or still the current owner, DuPont Street Developers, LLC. That is currently being completed by DuPont Street 1 LLC, the prospective purchaser. And then the comment period, as I mentioned, the RCRA closure plan has to be issued for a public comment period. We're anticipating to issue that for public comment sometime, hopefully in November, but you know, it may get pushed out by a month. That's it for me, Anthony. I don't know if any questions came up while I was talking, but I can stop sharing my screen. Stop share. Okay.
Thanks, Jane. There were questions. We're going to get to all the questions. We just have one final section that we want to allow the prospective new owners to present to the public. Please, as your questions come up, feel free to put them in a Q&A. We'll also we'll be able to have folks ask questions live if, during the Q&A if you raise your hand. So Ashley, and it's DuPont Street 1, if you guys are ready.
Okay. Zach will share his screen.
Thank you, Anthony. Gotta figure this out. Share.
Yep.
All right, can everyone see?
Yeah, we got it.
All right, perfect. So thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Ben, for hosting tonight. Thank you, Jane and team, for that presentation. Also want to thank the rest of the participants and hosts at OER and DOH, you know, generally agencies and community members for joining. We understand there's a lot of history with this site, and you know, we're excited about the opportunity to work with everyone and all the stakeholders to ultimately clean this up and redevelop this site. My name is Zach Caden. I'm Director of Development at Madison Realty Capital. For those of you Hold on, I'm just trying to change slides. There we go. So Madison Realty Capital is a vertically integrated real estate private equity firm. We're based in Manhattan. We have a lot of experience developing in the 5 boroughs, residential, commercial, and mixed-use development. Here on the screen, you'll see 3 representative projects that we've done. The first 2, 490 and 504 Myrtle Avenue, are very similar to what we're proposing at DuPont Street. It would take advantage of the voluntary inclusionary housing program, which means there's an as of right, it's all as of right. But basically, if we provide affordable housing on site, we would get a little FAR bonus. On the right-hand side, this is a project that we're working on right now, similar size and scale to DuPont. This is in Woodside, Queens. We're actually partnered with the School Construction Authority. We're building about 480 units, 144 affordable units, and providing a 478 student K-5 public school. Also, which I think is worth noting, is through most of these projects, particularly the Queens rezoning, we've had a lot of experience working with communities, elected stakeholders, and community groups within neighborhoods to bring projects to fruition and deliver and execute on community goals. Here's a site map that highlights the development site that we're talking today, 49 DuPont or NuHart. You could see highlighted Greenpoint Landing, some of the completed projects, as well as the high-rise development under construction on Commercial Street, and also to the west. I think also what's very important to highlight as we go through this, there's no variance or special permit that is being asked. This is all as of right. And also with respect to its location, the scale is carefully considered, and we're taking into account the surrounding neighborhood. So you will see from this very, very rough massing that we're talking about 8 stories on the corner of Franklin and DuPont. And then as you get, further east, the buildings step down to 5 and 4 stories. Right now, we're proposing a masonry structure, still very early in the weeds, and you'll see some open space. I do want to highlight, as Jane and the rest of the team mentioned, we are a prospective purchaser. We are the current lender. We do believe that ultimately we will be the ultimate owner of this property. And because of that, we've hired a full new team of consultants, from an architect and engineers, to design what we think is the best fit for this project. But also we've retained the environmental consultant, James Bello at Haley Aldrich, for continuity. He's been with the site for a long period of time and has been extremely helpful in helping us wrap our hands around the existing conditions, the cleanup that's required, and ongoing dialogue with the various agencies, whether it be OER, DEC, and local electeds. So here's the same slide that you saw Jane present earlier, which splits the site into NuHart West and NuHart East. The registry site on the left-hand side, Jane went into detail, but I think what's important is everything is under the jurisdiction of DEC and OER, and that they will basically have to bless all action that happens on this site. So the west is the registry, and as Jay mentioned, the east on the right-hand side is the brownfield site. Quick overview of remediation and development timeline. As Jane mentioned, we did some geotech borings earlier this summer. Today, abatement is ongoing. This was started by the prior owner. This really is subject to the jurisdiction of DEP and DOL. We mobilized about a week and a half ago. This week it's been slowed down due to rain. We also understand that community members have seen people in and out of the building. We are working, the owner of the abatement company manages inflow and outflow of the building to make sure that we don't have people walking off the street, because we know once those gates come up, there's a lot of interest of people to see what's inside. Also, we're working in parallel right now against a tight deadline to further develop with our design team, drawings, construction documents, and DOB approvals in parallel, which would be for demolition, foundation, and ultimately the new building. We've had conversations with the various agencies, DEC and OER, regarding the cleanup, brownfield, the remedial design, and what's required to ultimately allow us to redevelop the site and clean it up. Right now, we're in the middle of the brownfield public comment period, which ends on November 12th. And we anticipate in a couple weeks or to the end of the year, the RCRA closure plan public comment period. And then at next year at some point, the remedial action work plan for the registry site. And I think that this is the most important slide for today's meeting. We understand there's a lot of history here. You now have a new face, a new company, and contact info, and a resource to talk to about the ongoing activities, the redevelopment plan, and our collaboration to clean up, most importantly, clean up the site, and then redevelop NuHart into a nice, affordable housing complex for the neighborhood. So we're committed to working with the agencies. We're committed to safety. I think, we've demonstrated that early on just by our initial outreach to agencies, electeds, and neighbors. We're not going anywhere. There's some contact information on the bottom of the slide. DuPont@MadisonRealtyCapital.com is an email address that I will receive and we will respond to. And then also Ashley Thompson, who's on the call, has, understands the neighborhood, understands the site, and she's been a strategic partner of ours, wrapping our hands around the complications and tasking us with this tough challenge to clean it up and redevelop the site. Yeah, go ahead, Anthony. So that's our presentation. So thank you. Stop share.
Great, thanks. So as promised, we're gonna leave the majority of the meeting for questions and answers. For the panelists, if you can turn your camera on while answering questions, that'd be helpful. Also, if you want to refer to a specific slide, please do so. The first question will be from Lincoln Wrestler, and then we'll go through all the questions in the Q&A. I'll ask Nicole and Alan to serve those up. So first we'll go with Lincoln, if you are ready.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks to everybody for joining this call, and to the organizers, North Brooklyn Neighbors, Ben and Steve, and everybody for being on. If I'm lucky enough to be the next council member, you can be sure that I'm going to do my best to ensure that there is constant communication, a very active community advisory board type structure, where we're hearing directly from the new developer and engaging with the relevant city and state oversight entities, OER and DC. The question is for Jane. Just could you clarify a little bit more crisply, for the developer to be eligible to have a foundation in place for the affordable housing tax credits that they're looking to access? What stage of cleanup needs to be accomplished? And secondly, could you just speak to their responsibility for cleanup of the entire site beyond the borders of their property?
Sure. Anthony, I just tried to turn on my video, but I'm not able to. I'm not sure if you have the controls on that.
I do not, but you should be able to. It's okay.
Video settings. Well, I have my camera turned on, but it's not showing me, so.
Oh, it's all good. I feel like you can get to
there it is. Okay. Hi,
Yeah.
everyone. I'm wearing my DEC patch, so that's how you know who I am. To answer your question, the 421A tax credits, those are administered by the city, HPD, or, they're under the auspices of HPD. And there's a deadline in June of 2022 to have a foundation element in the ground. That can be as minimal as like just a footing. To answer your other question, so in terms of what needs to be remediated, the reason that they've submitted a what's called an interim remedial measures work plan for that work is there's sort of a distinct area of contamination. And if you let me, I'll share my screen again. Let's see if I can find it. Hold on, let me dismiss that. Okay. Oops. So generally speaking, the brownfield side of the property doesn't have any real contamination other than, mostly historic fill. The only exception is this upper right-hand corner here, where, as I said, there were some petroleum tanks that were used to heat the building. So the IRM that we have proposed right now before us is to take these tanks out. That will address a specific source of contamination that's on the brownfield side of the site. It will also allow them to put in a small foundation element to vest for those 421A tax credits. To your second question about what is their obligation for remediating the entire site or remediating off-site, the prospective purchaser has to sign on to the consent order. There's an existing consent order that goes back to the original owner of the property. And that consent order obligates whoever signs on to it to remediate, to implement the ROD, essentially. The ROD calls for cleanup both on-site and off-site. So the prospective purchaser would be obligated to implement that ROD and clean up both on-site and off-site. And hopefully that answers your question.
Just to clarify also, for the foundation elements that would help the developer qualify, would those would be placed in the brownfield portion of the site, or the
correct?
Okay.
Correct. There would be no. We've already told them there will be no foundation element or anything put here on the registry site until we have a completed remedial design that has been vetted by DEC, DOH, and the North Brooklyn Neighbors technical grant folks. There's not going to be any excavation happening here until we have a complete approved remedial plan. So the only work that's being proposed is on the brownfield side of the portion of the property for this 421A activity.
Nicole and Alan, do you want to start sharing some of the questions on the Q&A?
Sure. Yeah, I'll share the first question.
Do you want to leave this figure up, or should I? I'll stop sharing. I can stop sharing.
I think it's helpful to have a site plan. I don't know if you don't mind continuing to share your screen.
I can. Can you still share the questions if I'm sharing my screen?
Yeah, I'm going to read them. I'm going to start reading them out loud.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think that's helpful to have a visual. So the first question we have is from Heather Milburn. She'd like to ask if any of the vendors currently working in the warehouse are aware of what is in the ROD. Over the past few weeks, some of this was just addressed, I think, by Zach, but let's ask it again. Over the past few weeks, we've seen people walking in and out of the warehouse, not even wearing face masks. Who's responsible for on-site monitoring and enforcement of people working at the site?
Okay, Anthony, I'm also having some trouble turning on my
Yeah,
video.
I think I don't know what the issue is.
It says you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
Oh, I'm not doing anything. That's so
So I guess to answer the question is, yes, our consultants and contractors are aware of what's in the ROD and the current conditions on site. And what was the next part of it? The next part of your question?
The next part of the question from Heather, sorry, let me just bring that up again, was who is responsible for on-site monitoring / enforcement of, I think she is implying safety of the people working at the site.
So typically, I mean, each contractor is responsible for their own supervision of their people, whether it's a foreman or the owner of the company. For the abatement, the owner of the company is there regularly. I know that we got feedback that from neighbors, some pictures, they saw someone without an outfit on, which happened to actually be the owner of the company checking on his team to make sure they were doing the right job. In addition, for the abatement, there's third-party air monitoring. So there's a team there also who oversees the work to make sure that that's compliant and following the required regulations.
And I'll just follow up with one more question from Heather. We had been previously told that they would not be mitigating any phthalates under the street due to utilities under the street. Has that changed?
This is Jane O'Connell. No, we're not able to excavate to remove the phthalates that are under the street. And so let me see if I can go. I don't have a figure that shows it, but so the phthalates that are under the current building, those would be excavated and removed. The phthalates that are off under the sidewalk and the street, those would be recovered using recovery wells and or trenches to pump out that material. But because of the utilities under here, it's not able to be excavated out.
I think we have a question from Assemblymember Gallagher.
Yeah, thank you. This is for the developer and I guess for everyone. So 421A is up for renewal this year, and there's a lot of conversation about it not being renewed. I'm wondering if 421A is not renewed, if that changes the scope of your project or your ability to develop the affordable units on the lot. Thanks.
Okay, great question. Thank you, Assembly Member. So I would say yes. The rush is to get a footing in the ground to vest for the tax abatement. Just to clarify, it's an abatement, not credit, slight difference, for the financial feasibility of this project. So ultimately, once we vest in our underwriting, that's really what enables us to do the cleanup and make this project pencil. Without that and the uncertainty of the renewal or what it looks like in a new form, there's uncertainty, larger uncertainty about the project.
So to follow up, what would happen, not to get too deep into hypotheticals, but what would happen? Would you sell the site if 421A is not renewed?
I don't think I can speak to that at this point. I mean, we're focused on getting that footing. We believe with the close collaboration with the agencies and the community, we can find a solution to get there, and we can clean it up and redevelop it.
Ben, you can go ahead.
Thanks. If my video, there we go. This is for Jane. I guess also two questions about the under the street. Just to, I think, to clarify or to expand on the first one, those wells have been active for several years, extracting material, correct? Is there any way to quantify how much has been extracted? And then the second part is on the plume diagram you had. Has there been any? Well, the diagram had a solid line and a color block, and I wanted to see if that, or one was dotted, but yeah, does the plume do you have any indication of whether the plume has expanded in the last couple of years?
That's a good question, Benjamin. Thank you. So to answer the first part of your question, the wells that are currently active that are pumping are inside the building. They're in this area here. Off the top of my head, I don't know how much they've recovered over the years. I don't know if James Ballou, if you have do you know how much there's been recovered?
Yeah, it's about 4,000 gallons.
Okay. So the answer to answer your question, Ben, it can be recovered. It is being recovered right now. So we're confident that we'll be able to use that same technology to recover the material that's under the street. To your second question, this blob that's shown here, we do have wells that are sort of outside of it. And in fact, this is not the actual El Napple extent. Let me, hang on, this one might be a good one. Hang on. This yellow line, if you guys can see it, is the extent of the El Napple, the light non-aqueous phthalates. So we have a well, we have wells here, we have wells here, 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 and here. Those continue to be monitored on a monthly basis and have been for many years. And we have not seen any evidence that this advancing face of the plume has migrated any farther than it already has gotten to. So the figure that shows this blob, this is just showing in green areas where we might, again, this will be fleshed out in the remedial design, where we might place recovery wells.
And the same with the TCE plume?
The TCE plume is up here. That's a different, that's a little bit of a different animal. Let me see if I can find that one. Hold on. Okay, so the TCE plume is up in this corner of the site. Interestingly, the phthalates seem to have been migrating in this direction, whereas the TCE is flowing in the direction that the groundwater is flowing. The groundwater is flowing up towards Newtown Creek. The phthalates are flowing in this direction, and the reason for that, we believe, is because of the thickness of the amount of phthalates that were released on site, sort of created its own hydraulic gradient, if you will. And that's why the phthalates are moving sort of perpendicular to the direction of groundwater flow. But in terms of the remedy for the chlorinated solvents, that would not be a pump and treat or recovery wells, because this is all just dissolved phase. So this would be treated, as I said, through air sparging and soil vapor extraction, or an equivalent technology such as in situ chemical oxidation, after they excavate out the source of those chlorinated solvents, which is in this area here.
Thank you.
I think, can we go, let's see. We have a question for Zach from Laura Hoffman. She says, during your phone call, you stated that your company would consider suggestions from the community to go above and beyond what DEC requires. Can you expound on that? You also indicated that your company would consider a bulletin of a sort to inform the community in advance of work that would be that could be expected shortly. Can you also talk about that? I think also, I think that some of you may be able to show your cameras now that you're co-host.
Okay. So the first item, Laura, as mentioned on our call, we said we were open to that, but I couldn't say a general blanket will always go above and beyond. In consultation, once we look at DEC, once DEC says you need to do X monitoring and we can have someone else on site or do some additional monitoring, we'd be open to that. But we have to sort of look at each individual event, each of the requirements and then understand from you and the rest of the community what you're looking for and see how we can accommodate both. So I think it's going to be an ongoing process that'll be part of these monthly meetings or one-off calls. So we still stand behind, we're open to it, but I can't just sit here and say, yes, we will, because I don't know what we're committing to.
And another follow-up, as of the share of market rate, are you committed to 80-20, 80% market, 20% affordable, or is that open for negotiation?
Yeah, so the program is 80-20, and I believe the AMI is at 80% of AMI, but I can confirm and get back to you. And those units are distributed throughout the building per HPD's guidelines.
Sorry, and just not to lose the other question. Her other question was if a bullet, I believe if a bulletin to provide updates to the community would be provided as also
Thank you,
discussed.
Nicole. So Anthony shared with us, I guess, the North Brooklyn Neighbors Initiative for communication that I went through with our team, and we'd be happy to participate in that. So I guess we can use that forum. I believe, Anthony, correct me if I'm wrong, you get the updates and you post it to some blog or some website that people can go to see what's going on the site.
Yeah, it's called the Good Neighbor Initiative. And we have a number of developers who participate. Typically, they provide bi-weekly updates that we post on our website.
Yeah, so that works for us, and we're happy to participate. I think, I mean, just quickly scanning some of these comments. I saw a comment about the sidewalk. We hear you loud and clear as a neighbor. We actually sent someone there, I believe 2 weeks ago, to clean up the sidewalks around the site and remove the garbage. And we were there last week, so it definitely looks better, and we plan to continue to clean it up periodically. Also, I understand the history of this site on Halloween. So we actually are working with a private security contractor, and we're going to provide 24-hour security for this, I guess, Friday to Sunday.
Great, thank you. Moving on to a few more questions. Vanessa Bruno is asking what mechanism is in place within the structure that is to be built to prevent odor, debris, that will also prevent vapor spread like TCE. And just to follow up, there's a two-parter. If TCE is detected via air tests, what recourse would the community have? The public can purchase TCE tags that detect the presence of TCE in their homes. Currently, it's contained, but what should happen due to disruption of the plume? What would be the next steps?
I can. This is Jane O'Connell. I can answer part of that. So the remedy. So the building that's going to be built on the site will be required to have what's called a subslab depressurization system. That's a system that would prevent vapor from infiltrating into the new building. As part of the remedial action, there will be a robust community air monitoring plan. They'll be monitoring for dust, odors, and volatile organic compounds throughout the remediation process. And there would be specific courses of action taken for any excursions from the set guidance for those compounds.
Joe and Alan, do you want to provide any other info about subslab depressurization?
Hi, this is Alan. Well, a couple things. Ideally, if the excavation and the remediation is successful, the source of TCE under the building should be gone, or at least severely limited. So that may not be a concern, but regardless of that, this subslab depressurization is a very common approach in areas where there's groundwater that could potentially release vapors. It's used extensively. It is very effective. It's cheap to operate, and with new construction, it is very easy to install it as part of the construction. So that if it gets to that, it's a prudent part of new construction. It would be pretty standard stuff. So I don't see that as a big concern, and that would be factored into the design of a new building. But hopefully the remediation will reduce the need for that. Then it becomes sort of a fallback.
So this is Scarlett. I can't share my video either right now. I'm with New York State Department of Health. I work with Jane at DEC, and my team, Steve Lawrence is the project manager that was recently assigned to this site, and Angela Martin, who also is on here, who is his supervisor. We're going to review all aspects of the remedial design, including any subslab depressurization systems and verification of its effectiveness. If one is installed on the main building on NuHart West. And to speak a little bit more to, I wasn't entirely sure I understood the question as far as the air, what would be in place for the air, for the structure. Were you talking about new building to be built on the site, or were you talking about under the enclosure for while excavation was going on? Can you provide a little clarification, whoever it was that asked that question? Because for the structure itself, typically, if it's done under a tent, there's some sort of air filtration, carbon filtration that would be part of the design that we would review along with DEC before anything was implemented as well. But at any rate, anything that's going to be done on the site as far as intrusive activities or development or whatnot, there definitely has to be a robust community air monitoring plan in place that includes monitoring with very conservative levels at the down gradient, the downwind as well as the upwind areas. And if any of those very conservative levels are reached, then actions are taken to address those concerns well before there's any sort of a health concern for those values. So I'm sorry, I can't.
This is Nicole here. Just I believe the participants, the way the settings are in the Zoom call, apologies everyone, the participants are all muted and cannot speak. So Vanessa just put in the chat, Jane mentioned a structure. I think you just referenced this, Scarlett.
Yep.
Jane mentioned a structure to be built over building A while remediation was taking place. So that's
Right.
Also, if you are listed as an attendee and you want to speak, feel free to raise your hand and we'll unmute you. So I think, Vanessa, you actually can take the floor.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. I did have a number of questions and I apologize for the number of questions I have, but I have children and this entire process is really freaking me out. We are moving to North Brooklyn in about a month. We've purchased there, so we will be there for the entire duration of the remediation and development of this property. I know from speaking to other members of the community that there are a number of us with autoimmune conditions and high risk for developing other diseases that could be triggered by a lot of the environmental toxins here. So most of my questions are about that. But to clarify, my question before was just regarding the structure that was to be built over building A. Like, what is in place to prevent the toxins from drifting into the playground across the street? We'll be moving a block away. That's sort of my main concern there.
Right.
And I'm happy to take you through the rest of my 100 questions, but I don't want to take everyone's night.
Right. Well,
So
I think
this is Jane. Let me just, I'm sorry, Scarlett, just the remediation of the main portion of the Superfund site will be done under a completely enclosed negative pressure structure, a sprung structure, a tent, if you will, that will have all of the air that is inside that will be filtered before it's released out. So it's a very robust system. We've used it very effectively at a couple of other very high profile sites throughout the state. And Scarlett can speak to the sort of the other details on that.
Yeah. So typically, in addition to being, pressurized and contained, any air that's within that gets filtered before it goes out. So that we wouldn't expect that to affect the outside community playgrounds or anywhere. So that's a very protective thing. Additionally, community air monitoring plan will be in place that's approved by the agencies. And that's what I was speaking to before about monitoring stations that would be around for volatile organic compounds, particulates or dust, and odors also, because sometimes there's odors associated with the site and people can be sensitive to those too, even if it's not something that would cause a major health effect. Sometimes you can smell things and that can be bothersome to people. So that also tends to be included in these. But as I said, the community air monitoring plan, those action levels that we set, they're very, very sensitive. They're very sensitive pieces of equipment that are set very low, well below anything that would be expected to be a health concern if people were to, say, breathe something in at those concentrations, because we want to take actions if anything's even remotely close to really going off site. So those community air monitoring stations, typically, if you've ever seen one, they look kind of like a little suitcase on top of a tripod. So that, I'm sorry, I heard something. Did someone ask something? Oh, well, but that's something that everybody in this group here of DEC, DOH, and the community consultants as well would take a look at and have the opportunity to review and ensure it's protective of public health. Because we share the same concern. We don't want anything going off site, nor do the developers. So we will be actively involved in all of that.
Are those readings available for public viewing anywhere?
I'm not sure if that's set up.
We haven't set anything up yet for that. We're not at that step yet to, we're not starting the remediation yet.
Or will they be?
Certainly, well, when we can certainly have a discussion, with the developer. They're required to send us daily reports during the remediation. It doesn't include the raw download. These machines collect data constantly. And so it produces a very voluminous set of data. But it has an alarm on it that it'll essentially alarm if it goes above the set threshold that's set there. So usually in the daily reports that we get, it will just say, if there has been an exceedance or if there hasn't been an exceedance. But we usually don't get the raw data download from these machines. Normally once a week or once every 2 weeks we'll get that. But we'll get the same day we'll know whether there's been any excursions.
Right.
But we can certainly look into how we can get that data out to the community, in a timely fashion.
Yep. And just to point out, the alarms that are on those are not for, this is warning danger or anything like that. That's just, hey, an exceedance, we're getting close to exceeding these conservative action levels, so that we need to take a look at the actions that are on site. Is there some visible dust or something that needs to be addressed before it's a problem?
I see Joe has his hand raised.
Yeah, let's go to Joe, and then we're going to go back to Hans, who has a question. So Joe first.
Yeah, I just want to say that I've had experience in working with DEC Region 9 to put out data like this publicly. All of the constraints that Scarlett and others have talked about, and Jane, you don't want, massive amount of data, on the internet if you're not familiar with how to interpret it. So I think designing, that kind of information, we have experience in doing that, and hopefully can help make that possible.
Hans, do you want to ask your question?
Actually, it's Hans and Daphna together. my question was about these public comment periods, because there's a lot of stuff you're telling me right now that I didn't know was going on at all. So how would I have gotten the information, for instance, that they had been remediating this entire time? The comment period is halfway over for one of those. And we live directly across the street. So this is also for the developer. What kind of reaching out to the community will you be doing? Because I feel like we're very much a part of what's going on. We live right across the street. We're very, very much affected by what's happening, and we didn't know any of this.
I can take the start at this, and then Zach, if you want to jump in. So the public comment period, so the way this works is we issue fact sheets through our DEC issues fact sheets out through, we have a listserv, we do mailings to local elected officials, the community board, and some other folks. But we do have the listserv. We do have, when I had the other public meetings or the other community meetings that I've been to, I've encouraged everybody to sign up for that, because, if you're in a rental building, sometimes we'll send the notice to the owner of the building. We don't necessarily send it to every, if there's a 10-story building or whatever it is, it doesn't go to every tenant in the building. That's just it's an unfortunate reality that especially for rental units, that doesn't work. But I will tell you, we do have a if you go on DEC's website, you can sign up and have these fact sheets and these notices sent directly to your email.
Hi, this is Laura Hoffman speaking. This is exactly why we've been complaining from the get-go of this entire process, even during the time with the first owner, that there needs to be more community outreach, and not just community boards and libraries and stuff like that. I mean, somebody has to do something out at the door to door on the blocks that are right there by the facility, because it's scary even just to hear talking about what's going to happen if there's an exceedance, because people that are sick with autoimmune diseases and brain conditions and stuff like that, like me and my family, right, we can't afford an exceedance, right? That's why we're looking for the developers, people like Zach and his team, to really go above and beyond what DEC is going to do, because as attendees can tell, it's not enough.
So I just wanted to respond. I mean, I guess Laura will address something you just mentioned, but to Hans and Daphna's earlier comment. So again, apologize, I guess, that our initial outreach, we didn't contact you, but the good thing is now you know who we are. You have a direct line to us. Ashley and our team will reach out to you after this meeting. If you want to put in the direct chat to me or Ashley, your contact info, we're happy to meet on site, happy to meet in person, walk with you, and we can have ongoing dialogue through this process. But on a more global community scale, as we mentioned to Anthony, we're going to participate in the Good Neighbors Initiative. So I think it's every week or every 2 weeks, you'll get updates posted with other developers in the neighborhood as to what's going on site.
That's great. This is Laura again. That's great for the people who know about it, but how about the people who have autoimmune disease on that block that haven't been reached out to yet?
So we can, I believe we have a list of all the neighbors, adjacent sites. So one way or another, whether it's a physical appearance or a call or email, we'll make sure to contact those neighbors.
Great.
And Laura, I also wanted to speak to something you mentioned too, as far as the exceedance levels, the action levels that are set for camp monitoring stations are not set somewhere where we expect a health effect. And when when our, when we're reviewing those action levels and what an appropriate level is to set there, we actually take into account extremely conservative measures, who the most sensitive communities could be and populations could be, because we don't set that at a level where we expect the health of even of the most sensitive individuals. We want it to be very conservative. We want it to be very low, because without any exposure, we wouldn't expect any health effects. So that's what our goal is to have those levels set so low that it's not any sort of a concern, and actions can be taken as expeditiously as possible before it ever was a concern. So to your point, it's well taken, and that's exactly what our goal is as well.
That's great. And but this is an extraordinary community in that we've been exposed to nearly everything that you can think of. So we I believe are of higher risk than almost any other neighborhood than I can think of. And that's another reason why I think things should be going above and beyond what the norm, because we're not only dealing with this site, we're dealing with a number of sites and a great deal of old pollution, including, I mean, this is a neighborhood that's going on its third Superfund site. That's not even a typical environmental justice area. So we need to know everything in advance. I personally experiencing issues with my brain and autoimmune disease and cancer and every other godforsaken disease that there is. I cannot afford even one puff of contaminated dust.
Understood.
This is Vanessa Bruno. Can I raise my hand really quickly here as well?
Excuse me, Vanessa, sorry. Can we go to Assemblymember Gallagher real quick? She's been patiently waiting in the background to speak. And then we'll get back to you.
Oh, that's actually from the last time I needed to take my hand down. I apologize. Thank you for calling on me though.
No problem. Vanessa.
Sorry, guys. Thank you. Just to Laura's point, I think, one of the concerns mentioned was that there had been workers like walking in and out of the facility without proper protective gear on. And I think, that was addressed. But part of my concern is if you're exposed to asbestos within a building and then you leave the building, then aren't you exposing the community to the asbestos? And that leads me to the question, what contractor is in place that's doing the asbestos remediation? Are we privy to that information as neighbors?
No, so Vanessa, so first of all, asbestos really becomes an issue once you disturb it. So if they are walking out of the building and going on a lunch break or sitting down, they don't necessarily need to be covered or masked. It's once they're actually touching and disturbing the asbestos that they need to be protected. I'm happy to send you everyone on site is licensed to handle the abatement who works for the contractor. The contractor's name is 212 Services. And you could see the permits that are public at DEP and DOL that are issued. So that's all public information.
And Jack,
This is Jane. I just want to go ahead, James.
Yeah, with the asbestos abatement, there's a station where they don their PPE within the building. They go in, and really when they disturb the asbestos, it becomes friable. And they're already wearing all of their PPE in a sealed enclosed work area. And then upon leaving the sealed enclosed work area, they derobe out of their PPE and decon before they exit the building. So these are strict procedures that are set forth by the city.
Yep. Thanks. That was exactly what I was going to comment on. They are not tracking anything outside. They have to decontaminate before they leave the work area. So when you're seeing them walking outside, they're in their street clothes. They're not in the PPE. That's why.
Thank you. We have a number of questions queued. So let's go in this order. Michael Hoffman, Kevin LaChara, then Ben Solitaire.
Yeah, this is Mike. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I just wanted to find out from Jane if at one time DEC was trying to get into the buildings across from NuHart on Clay Street to see if these buildings were contaminated and they couldn't get in. Did they ever get into these buildings to find out if the ground was contaminated?
Specifically, Michael, what we were looking for in those buildings across across Clay Street was we wanted to sample for soil vapor intrusion. The owners of those properties, despite multiple attempts by DEC, DOH, I believe even the council member's office made some outreach, those property owners refused access to us. The ownership has not changed since then. We will continue to do outreach to them, but they're not obligated to allow us access to their private property.
Okay, so you still won't know if the plume went under their property, right?
The vapor plume, so the groundwater plume does not go in that direction. We have monitoring wells that go in that direction that show it is not moving. The groundwater is not moving in that direction. The vapor sampling that we did on the sidewalk on the, I want to say the north side of Clay Street, there were some elevated concentrations just in front of those. I don't know if there were 2 or 3 buildings. And that prompted us to request access from those owners, and they denied that access.
Okay, thank you.
Kevin, Ben, and then Hans.
Thanks, Anthony. I guess this is a little bit of a question for the developers. It's just something I heard earlier, which is that Laura Hoffman had asked the question, will they go above and beyond what the DEC requires? It seemed to have been a conversation or some capacity in that way. And it just sort of seemed to be a little bit of a half answer from the developers about, well, we'll see what happens, so on and so forth. And I just really do want to highlight the importance of this site. How important of a site this is to the community. This is one of the major environmental disaster legacies in Greenpoint. And so, I just want to echo and thank Laura and Mike and so many of the neighbors up there in Northern Greenpoint for being on this for so long, and really highlight to the developers that we need you to go above and beyond. What the DEC is requiring is not enough. Similar to the AMI, worries me about, the fact that they're going to say, okay, they're going to keep to exactly what 421A, basically the bare minimum. They're not going to go above and beyond on affordable housing. They're going to do the 80% AMI. I have, doubts or reservations about whether or not they will go above and beyond in making sure that this area is cleaned up in a real way. So I just, that's all. I just really want to kind of echo Laura and push back a little bit, because I heard that it was a little bit frustrating that it seemed like there was a conversation there where they said one thing and, now they're going to try to take a middle road on it, which I think this community has heard time and time and time again. Right. Yeah, I don't know if the developers want to speak to that at all. But it definitely, it didn't fill me with a great deal of optimism that we're going to split hairs about what above and beyond means. I'd like something more concrete.
Okay. I mean, I hear you, Kevin, loud and clear. I understand the importance of the site. As I mentioned earlier, I can't blanketly just agree to something. We have a history of executing projects and working with communities. We've gone above and beyond on other projects with stakeholders. So at each step, we'll be talking regularly, we'll communicate and work together.
Okay.
So Benjamin and Hans, and then we'll go back to the Q&A questions.
I just wanted to make an addition or a comment about the notification and communication. I think posting stuff to the NBN site is good, and if I missed this, forgive me, but also we get, there are many developments that we get weekly updates directly on email blast from, and I know somebody said they get those and they've never learned anything, but if you could have an email sign up for people that along with whatever you post gets emailed directly to people so they don't have to remember to go check Java Street, 77 commercial, 65 commercial, the several others do that. And it's always very helpful to read what's going on.
Ben, I think that's a reasonable request, and we'll figure that out.
Yeah.
I think we'll just coordinate with you and your team maybe to get a list of some stakeholders or email addresses so we can add it to the serve.
Yeah, and I think at some point I'm happy with to go door to door in the neighborhood and talk to people as well. So
Hans or Daphne?
Hi, it's really me. But we're sitting together. So I had a question about and maybe this is for Jane O'Connell. The plume on DuPont Street has not been ever monitored because it's about 15 to 20 feet away from our property. And I don't really know where it is. I've always assumed it's moving away from our property, but how do we know that? And then I have another question, a quick question for Zach.
Unmute, Jane.
Which plume are so the
well,
let me see if I
on
can share my
DuPont Street,
screen
yeah,
here.
because everything you pointed to was on Franklin and on Clay Street, but nothing on DuPont Street. And you see that it's oh wait, yeah, I think it's the other one.
Let me give me 1 second. Let me
yeah, that's good.
All right, so we have monitoring wells here.
Oh, you
We have
do, okay.
monitoring wells
But where it
along
says
here.
the word, oh, okay. So right
Yeah,
on
we have
DuPont Street.
monitoring wells all along here. And again, let me get to the other figure. It's a little bit easier to see. This yellow line. So we have monitoring wells all outside of that line.
Ah, okay. Okay, so then we don't
And-
have to worry about it going to the east slightly and south.
No, we've
across
been
the street.
monitoring this plume for 10
Yes.
years now.
Yeah.
And it has not moved from what you're seeing on this screen right now.
Great. Okay, and then the other part of my question was for Zach, or whoever wants to answer this. On that same, go back to the picture, is it possible?
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay, because
Sorry.
I was gonna, it's perfect to show, but right across from the word DuPont in DuPont Street, there is a lot that is was a parking lot for, is that still part of the property?
No, that is not part of the Superfund site.
Oh, okay. No, not really for your thing, but is it part of the property? Zach, maybe you can tell me
No,
that?
to my knowledge, it's not part of the current collateral or part of the site.
Okay, then I don't need to ask you whether you would clean it up. Thank you.
Alan and Joe, would you like to chime in about just to confirm what Jane said about the wells on DuPont, the monitoring?
Well, this is Alan, the groundwater guy with the technical advisory group, and I would just confirm what Jane said, that that's been well monitored and it doesn't seem to be moving. Joe and I both have, as part of our job supporting the community, have reviewed all the, not only the ROD, but the site investigation reports and feasibility studies and all that. So we will speak up if we hear something that doesn't jive with that. But in terms of that specific question, I mean, Jane, I would just agree with that characterization that there's no movement of the plume at that particular location.
And do you guys mind putting your like emails in the chat just so if folks have follow-up questions, they can reach out to you? Nicole and Alan Minor, do you have other questions in the Q&A that we want to share?
Yeah. Let's see, there's a couple I think that have been addressed perhaps in other presentations, but I'll just read them aloud because it's helpful for everyone to hear. One is even just looking at this site plan, why aren't these maps reflecting the current development in the neighborhood around NuHart? For example, Blue Slip, Bell Slip properties. I believe Zach had a more zoomed out view, but even in this aerial photo, the kind of residential area, the new residential area, I should say, to the north and west of the site.
Zach, do you want to share that view so that folks can see that again in context?
I would love to. I just need to find that presentation. One sec.
We can go to the next question.
I think a community public meeting. We should be good.
And then a couple more that will, I think, Zach, you'll be able to answer here. We've also, I think some of, yeah, we can see your screen.
So yeah, if we, do you want to
Go
point
back
out?
one. Yeah, go back one slide, I think. Yeah, that one. No, back up one.
I see
Slide
the.
2.
I think this is a. I think this is
slide
Slide 4.
I think the slide 3, the site map, clearly shows how close, not only how close the site is to the water, but also how close it is to other open spaces in the neighborhood and publicly shared spaces, in addition to the private residential spaces as well.
Nicole, do you want to just point out a couple of spots so folks can be clear?
Yeah, I have the habit of always moving my arrow. Obviously, I don't have control of the screen. But you can see here at like the middle left of the image is the Newtown Barge Park, which is a public park on the waterfront. Just to the right of that is the Greenpoint Playground. Just south of that is the potential school development zone that's part of Greenpoint Landing. And that's also another question that has come up as to where the siting of that school is and what's the status of that. And then there'll be a new MTA park, I believe, where that current parking lot is being shown. Is that the right site? So there's several open spaces as well as a public school space directly adjacent to the development site, in addition to all the private residential and of course the shared right of way.
As this is up, do we want to, Ben, do you want to chime in about the school siting? Just Nicole, do you want to read that question and then Ben, you can start and then we can finish on the school siting issue?
Do you want to read the question first? I didn't see it, but. Or I can just say, listen, this is what, the potential school development site, we've been working on this for a couple of years. I guess I should turn on my camera, sorry. The council member is aware of the concerns and is feels the concerns of the community, is in agreement with those, that it is not a good place to put a school. It is too close. The phthalates are particularly affecting younger kids in their development. It's an endocrine disruptor. He said several years ago that he would not allow the school to be built there. He would not approve that. We have had we've looked, the problem is where else does it go? We've looked throughout the community for sites. We have had deep conversations with 2 sites, neither of which came to fruition. The city does this administration, which will be gone soon, does feel, they have a free site essentially. One of the sites we would get is in trade-off of additional floor area. That was the Red Sky site at Java Street. They ended up selling the building, and the new developers, though very working with the community and being very responsive, did not have an interest in putting a school there. And then we looked at another site that was interested in it, but wanted financial compensation. So the city, I suppose, said, for $50 million, why would we spend $50 million or more on a site that we have when we have a site for free? We've had several conversations with the SDOE and SCA, not in the last year, but so at the moment it is a stalled process in relocating it, and we will continue to look at it for the last few months of our term here.
And just for clarity, the SCA is the School Construction Authority.
Yeah, sorry.
In charge of.
Say that I was gonna chastise Jane earlier for using too many acronyms, and I did it myself. So.
So yeah, the siting of the schools is still a major concern for us. But we need a site. That's really the issue. And the previous opportunity for a site was sold, and the now current owner has like no experience building schools and also no interest in doing it as well. Nicole, you want to go to the next question?
Yeah, I
I
think
just put my
that-
contact in the chat, by the way, too, for anybody. So
So Vanessa had a few more questions just about the general timeline, which maybe we can just revisit for the group. What's the projected development timeline in full? This may have come in right when Zach had that slide up. And what would be the timeline of the remedial plan for the entire property, not just for building 2?
So in terms of, let's say, once the environmental, we get to go ahead to start the excavation, which would then include some remediations to new building, I'd probably say 2.5 to 3 years, just given the complications of cleaning up the registry site. But when that period really starts from is the big question mark right now.
And I have a follow-up question to that. Will you share who the design team is for the project? And
No, of course. Hill West, I think you saw their logo on the presentation. So they're the architect that we brought on board. McNamara Salvia is structural. MGE is MEP. JZN is geotech. Haley Aldrich is environmental. And then we're working with AKRF is doing civil, and Longman Lindsay is doing acoustical, and we have a landscape architect, but I think those are the key players.
And can you, I don't mean to hijack the questions, but can you also just speak to the kind of the streetscape and the open space that we saw in that early massing study? It looks like there's some green space at the sidewalk level and a potential kind of pass through the building as well from
Nicole.
DuPont to commercial.
So there's no pass through. On DuPont, you saw a motor court. So the idea is to take cars off the road, so there's no traffic. You could drop someone off that is going to the buildings, and then go to the parking, which would be on Clay. The green space you saw in between the buildings would really be private for residents. There'd be, I guess, ground floor private terraces for the units that are adjacent to that, and some common amenity. We are exploring for the open space or green space on Franklin that was shown to see if it could be private and public, or open to the public, let's say, which would be adjacent from that playground that's there today.
Great. And I guess we have another question in the chat, but I think it'll be useful for Jane and her colleagues from the state and city to chime in on this. There's a question about how do we prevent future sites like this and hold other companies accountable as to prevent Superfund sites from developments. I thought that might be useful to talk about the role of DC in current rate and OER, et cetera, in current regulation. So if you guys can just kind of basically share what your agencies do and when it comes to this kind of development and or construction, and ensuring that our land is safe. And so go ahead.
Okay, so let me start with, I mentioned the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, the RCRA program. That is a program that went into effect on the federal level. I know Alan's going to jump in if I get this date wrong. I'm going to say it was like the late 70s or the early 80s. And the purpose of that program is to ensure that, sites that use hazardous materials in their manufacturing process are properly managing that material and properly disposing of it so it doesn't get into the ground. On top of that, we have our chemical bulk storage program. The state has a petroleum bulk storage program. And just as it sounds like, those are to regulate the bulk storage of hazardous materials. to make sure those, that the tanks that they're using are properly constructed, that they're periodically tested to make sure they're not leaking. So a lot of these legacy sites, these go back to the early days of, early to middle 20th century, before any of these environmental regulations were in place. There are fairly robust regulations in place now for air discharges from facilities like this, for water discharges to the sewer or the surface water, to making sure that manufacturers or industrial uses are properly maintaining their equipment, making sure they're not releasing contaminants to the environment.
The OER, Department of Health, anyone else want to chime in on this piece?
This is Zach from OER. Good evening, everybody. Just to echo what Jane said, there are city agencies that are also involved in permitting for air quality. DEP handles any sort of air emissions that would be released along with the state. And also at the zoning level, certain uses are not allowed in areas of the city that are not zoned for industrial uses. And anything that's going to be built will have to go through the Department of Buildings and demonstrate that all of those requirements have been satisfied. So as Jane said, it's very difficult these days to build something like this from the start, especially in a dense city like New York. And there are a lot of controls in place to ensure that it's done safely if it is to be built.
And just to kind of piggyback on that, Department of Health also reviews a lot of those plans with RCRA facilities when they're closing things down or maintaining. So we review a lot of data for the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act sites as well, to make sure that things that are done are protective of public health for the community, the surrounding community as well.
Thank you all for that. If there are no more questions, I think that's going to bring us to an end. This conversation will continue. Future councilperson has also agreed to be very vigilant on the site. And you heard from the assembly member that she will also be on top of it. So it's good to ensure that our electeds are keeping an eye on the work that's going to be happening here. And of course, we will always, North Brooklyn Neighbors will also maintain our role as a monitor for the site. With that, we're going to save this recording for folks. And with that, we can say good night. Thank you all for coming. We appreciate it. Ben, you want to say something?
No, I just want to say, yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks.
Great meeting.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.